Hello everyone, welcome to the Redmen TV and your latest episode of Transfer Insight. My name is Dan Club. I'm delighted to be joined once again by the wonderful Kevin Hatchard. Kevin, first off, how are you? You okay?
Yeah, very good, very good. Preparing for moving house, so all very stressful. So this is a nice distraction from that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to be a nice distraction. That's the nicest thing anyone said about me for a while, actually. Somebody else who might be preparing to move house is Florian Wirtz.
Yes.
Yeah, a big old move as well, leapfrogging across Europe at some point in the not too distant future, it looks like. We're going to talk a lot about him, the player. I'm sure you're looking forward to that because obviously you watch him week in, week out for the past couple of years at least. Before we do, I want to touch on where we're at really in terms of the deal itself because there's been a back and two over the past 6, 7, 8 days of this bid's gone in, this bid's been rejected. From what you know in your experience, obviously, of working closely in Germany and Leverkusen and their sporting director and just how they operate, have you been at all surprised by their quite firm stance on, no, we have a valuation, we have a fee, and you need to come and pay that, otherwise he's not your player?
Yeah, not really. I mean, German clubs in general are pretty savvy about the transfer dealings they do because their health relies on it. You know, you look at Dortmund, they've been very, very savvy about guys like Jadon Sancho moving on for big fees. Jude Bellingham, they got a good fee from Real. Erling Haaland moved on. So they had that system in place. We've seen it with Leipzig time and time again, that they've developed talent, sold it on. But the thing to bear in mind with this is that he really is the jewel in the crown for Leverkusen. So they were never going to go, oh, you want to leave? Okay, away you go. We'll just accept anything that Liverpool offer. It was never going to be that way. It was always going to be a very complicated negotiation because it won't just be about the basic fee. It'll be about the add-ons. And then it's not just about the add-ons. It's about how achievable are those add-ons? What do they look like financially? So this was always going to be a really complex deal to do. I think there's a general willingness to do it. Wirtz has obviously made it clear, which is a huge boost for Liverpool, that he wants to come. And those personal terms are agreed. I mean, that's just modern football now. Players and agents talk to clubs before bids go in, because what you don't want is you don't want a situation where a club embarrasses themselves by making a bid for a player and they go, nope, not interested. So you don't want that. So that part of it's fine. It's just now making the numbers work for Leverkusen. And I can understand that because you've got to bear in mind they've lost their coach. They've lost their best defender in Jonathan Tah. And they are going to lose their best player by far in Florian Wirtz. So they need to get enough funds to try and give Eric Ten Hag what he wants for the new Leverkusen era.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And there is an expectation now that the deal will get done. They will make those numbers add up and make sense at some point. And also, to add to what you just mentioned there, they've obviously lost Jeremy Frimpong for what you would imagine would be a snip of the price that is sort of like market value. You know, clearly there's a release clause there, so therefore the deal's been done. But they will want to extract as much money as possible from this Wirtz deal, clearly. Let's talk a bit more about him, the player then. Made his debut at just 17, and I mean just 17. I had a quick look before we spoke. He was 17 and 15 days, so really, really wet behind the ears still. In terms of sort of the start of his career and the meteoric rise that's been, how sort of early did you notice just how supreme a talent this kid was?
Well, there was buzz about him before he even put the boots on for Leverkusen, because him actually arriving in the first place caused quite a stir, because the general feeling was that Köln, Gladbach and Leverkusen, who are very close to each other geographically in the Rhineland, they generally didn't take each other's youth players. But Leverkusen brought him in from Köln. Köln are still very sore about that. Köln are still talking about trying to get their cut of this particular deal, and I understand that because that's their right. And so you knew already this had to be a special talent. For Leverkusen to do that, that had to be a special player. And then he started playing and he realised how good he was. And the fact that he scored his first ever goal in the Bundesliga against Bayern, and it was a really good goal as well, and he became at the time the youngest ever Bundesliga scorer. So then you're looking at that thinking, okay, he's a player. And we were used to this at Leverkusen because we'd seen Kai Havertz come through, see him be a stellar talent. And as much as people want to malign Havertz, the guy's scored a winning goal in the Champions League final. He's having a very good career. There's no doubt about it. So, yeah, Wirtz, you could see, was very, very exciting. And Leverkusen, like many German clubs, is set up to allow young players to thrive. And so he was thrown in at the deep end and he started swimming straight away.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I want to touch on the injury side of things because does his ACL March 2022, recently had an ankle ligament injury as well earlier on this year, missed a handful of games because of that. I guess, I mean, the ACL is clearly a significant one, but he's clearly come back from that strong and there's no sort of concerns around any of that sort of stuff.
No, he took his time to come back. I think it was against Köln, actually, ironically, that he got the injury. And he came back, and obviously it's always going to take a little while for you to trust your body when you get back out there. But after a while, it was like he'd never been away. So I don't, obviously, if a player has had an ACL injury, that is a slight concern. That's always going to be there. But he's looked very strong. The ankle injury, actually, he came back a lot quicker than we thought from that. There was a feeling that he might not play at all, but he came back earlier than expected. Maybe wasn't his best self, and maybe he came back a little bit too quickly. But I think what that shows you is the dedication. He wanted to be part of that title push. He wanted to be part of the end of the season. So, yeah, he's a player that gets a lot of contact. He's a player that's always kind of making moves in tight spaces. So those injury issues are always going to be uppermost in your mind. But I wouldn't say he's injury prone. I think that's too far.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, let's talk a bit more about the player himself and sort of his attributes and what he does bring to the table. There's clearly a lot. I've watched the last couple of games from a German point of view on the national team. You've obviously watched a hell of a lot of him, commentated on him a lot as well. Try and sort of, because obviously we see the compilations and we see the highlights, we see some of the goals over here and stuff like that, but clearly a very stylish player. You mentioned tight spaces there, clearly very good in those situations, but try and tell us a little bit more about what Liverpool could well be bringing into the club.
Yeah, super intelligent. That's the first thing. Has a great picture of what's around him. Sees passes that a lot of people don't see. So he has that creative element. He's great at reading space. He's got a little bit of Thomas Muller about him in the sense that he always seems to know where to be, picks up the right pockets of space. So he's got a great way to pass as well. He can play ball with the outside of his boot if he has to, like a really nice cross, or he can just make goals in lots of different ways. I've seen him play really delicate kind of just flipped passes into the penalty area over a defender and to a striker running on. So that's the creative part. I think the second part to talk about is actually the defensive part, because it shouldn't be taken for granted. Not every player is willing to do it, but he will press and press and press. And I think Xabi Alonso has really improved his game in that regard. The willingness was always there, but now I think there's intelligent pressing there. He knows the right angles. He knows the right triggers. So you look at his numbers in terms of duels, as they'll call them in Germany and in data stat packs. He's right up there with anyone in the Bundesliga in terms of winning those challenges high up the pitch. So that's obviously going to be a natural fit for what Arne Slot wants. Liverpool are aggressive without the ball. So he's got the defensive side as well. And then in terms of the goal scoring, scores all types of goals. We saw Germany against France a while ago, not the game that's just happened, but a game a while ago where he scored an absolute banger 7 seconds in to the game. So absolutely brilliant goal. He can score from range, but he can also beat people in the penalty area and score. He can tuck the ball into the bottom corner. He's got lots of different weapons in the arsenal when it comes to scoring goals. And I think that's the most impressive thing about him so far. You get a lot of players who are assist heavy. You get a lot of players who score a lot of goals but don't create much. But in each of the last two Bundesliga seasons, he's been in double figures for goals and double figures for assists.